Hi, my name is Miss Austin. I'll be reading 33 minutes. We will be reading page 115 to 125. 1228. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Nurse Landon is a liar. Let the record show that Nurse Landon specifically said, twice, Principal Benson is waiting for you. Let the record show that she did not say, Principal Benson is waiting for you in his office, where you'll also find Morgan Stortz and Chris Tripodero. I rest my case. Because that's a way different thing to prepare yourself for, especially when you're not you, but me. Because if I knew I'd be walking into this particular 4-person get-together, I'd be hiding at the bottom of a trash can in a nearby bathroom right now, trying to figure out how to live off of whatever nutrients could be wrung out of the outfit in this plastic bag. Instead, I'm standing in my PE uniform, looking at Morgan and Chris in their PE uniforms, looking at Morgan and Chris looking at me, and looking for a place to sit. Chris's always stomach-churning mouth has that caged rat look to it. If this caged rat thought his cage was a fun place to hang out. Morgan's expression is a little harder to read, because he's much better than Chris at hiding whatever hides behind it. His jaw muscles are clenched, his eyebrows lowered, and his eyes can't find a single thing to settle on. If I had to guess, I'd say he's mad at me, scared of Principal Benson, and confused by being mad and scared at the same time. Hello, Samuel. Oh, right. Principal Benson and his deep, deep voice are also here. The other thing you should know about Principal Benson is that he has super huge sideburns, the kind that everyone has in movies about the Civil War. I wonder if he rides to school on a horse. Hi, Principal Benson. Please offer to get me a chair, or better yet, please invite me to go find a chair myself so I can calm down, or more likely, run straight for the Canadian border. Please, please, please. Principal Benson slowly looks around the room, and it appears for the first time, does the chairs minus people math. I hope you don't mind standing, Samuel. We seem to be fresh out of seats. No, sir, that's fine. Standing might put me at some sort of physical advantage. If Morgan weren't sitting down, my height. Not to mention me in my PE uniform versus Morgan in his, since he looks ready to star in the photo shoot for the PE uniform catalog. Either Chris cackles, or I just remember him cackling. Principal Benson rests his hands on his massive wooden desk, his fingers interwoven for the maximum, what I'm about to say to you is of great importance effect. He clears his throat. Gentlemen, would one of you like to tell me what that is on the wall behind me? A picture of a bunch of people parachuting, I answer. It says teamwork underneath. Well, yes. Principal Benson begins to turn around, but decides against it. But next to that, what do you see? The Viking Code, sir, Morgan says quietly. Correct, Morgan. Principal Benson nods. The Viking Code. And what is the Viking Code? Chris begins to make some sort of sound, and not a smart one, but magically catches himself at first. It's a list of words that start with the letters in Viking, Morgan answers. Indeed it is, Principal Benson tells us. Indeed it is. But that tells us only the outlines of the code, its contours. He pauses and looks at each one of us separately. It does not tell us its contents, which are a long, awkward silence until I ask, do you want us to tell you the words? Yes. Long, dramatic exhale. Would you be so kind, Samuel? Okay, well, virtue. Yes, virtue. Principal Benson turns his head a bit. Though V is not the most common letter, you might be surprised to know how many fine candidates there were that begin with V. Valor, vigor, victory. I initially supported victory, but Assistant Principal Hart persuaded me of well. Principal Benson chuckles for a second. The virtues of virtue. After running a thumb along one of his chops, he says to himself, "I think victory would have made a fine choice." Then he moves his hand to his chin and says, "You may continue." "Integrity?" I respond. "Yes, integrity," Principal Benson responds. The easiest decision of that evening. Everyone instantly recognized integrity to be a winner. Next, knowledge. Correct. Now here I had to take issue. Principal Benson points at Morgan. Because the first two words clearly refer to qualities we'd like to see in our students here at Wagner Middle School. A Viking acts with virtue. A Viking acts with... Principal Benson closes his fist for emphasis. Integrity. But can a Viking act with knowledge? This was my question until Carolyn Brewer, the esteemed head of our PTA, said, "Otis, perhaps these are things our students pursue. A Viking pursues virtue. A Viking pursues integrity and knowledge." We're lucky to have Carolyn on board. We truly are. Continue, gentlemen. Intelligence, Morgan reads. Yes, intelligence. There was a quick consensus on integrity, but the second I, gentlemen, was a challenge. A large parent bloc advocated for incorruptibility, while a number of teachers rallied around inquisitiveness. But I helped everyone see the value of something a little more, how should I say, intelligible. Principal Benson chuckled, and I tried to join in, but can't. "Samuel, why don't you give us the rest?" "Okay, my legs are getting tired. Never give up. In greatness." Principal Benson chuckled yet again for a second. "Now you'd think in, there must be a million winning terms that begin with in. Well, you'd be surprised. Niceness. That was about all we could find, even after poring over our library's thesaurus. Made me wish I'd thrown my hat in the ring for the job over at Nichols. Raider would have given you responsibility and discipline. But we carried on, and I think you'll agree with me when I say that we ended on a high note." There's the Viking Code. A few moments of awkward silence. "So, gentlemen," Principal Benson returns his hands to the original "I'm a man of great wisdom" position. "That is the what of the Viking Code, but can anyone explain to us the why of the Viking Code?" I turn to Morgan for a second. He notices and nods his head at me quickly, like I'd better help out here. "It is how we're supposed to behave, sir," I say. "Exactly," Principal Benson responds with a big smile of satisfaction, like this might explain the last 3 minutes. "Who is a Viking? Who should a Viking aspire to be? Virtue, integrity, knowledge, intelligence, never give up, greatness." Principal Benson's face goes blank for a moment, and he says under his breath, "Can't believe that's all we could get for in." But he recovers quickly, suddenly stands up, and begins pacing behind his desk. "Now I ask you, gentlemen, did the acts committed in our cafeteria just moments ago measure up to the Viking Code?" "No, sir," we answer together, or at least Morgan and I answer together. No, they did not," Principal Benson reminds us. "They absolutely did not. There is no integrity in throwing applesauce. There is no greatness to be had in pelting a fellow Viking with a tater tot. And knocking out a fellow Viking with a reinforced heavy-duty salad bowl made from 80% post-consumer recycled plastics is not, I repeat, not, an act of intelligence. Thankfully, our very own Mr. Greggs, who was recently transported to Glen Hills General for post-traumatic counseling, spearheaded our investigation aimed at reconstructing the final moments leading up to that last, dastardly act. According to the testimony of no fewer than 3 eyewitnesses, one of these 2 young men, Principal Benson points across the desk and glares accusingly at Morgan and Chris, is responsible for your injury, Samuel. Arms still extended, Principal Benson turns back to me. Unfortunately, neither has yet admitted guilt. We have been waiting for you to regain consciousness with the hopes that you yourself could identify your assailant, who, you can be sure, eyes back on Morgan and Chris, shall pay a very stiff price for such a wanton violation of the Viking Code. A very stiff price indeed. Principal Benson pauses and crosses his arms. I've got to admit, the suspense is killing me, which would be easier to wait through if I had a chair. Expulsion from Wagner Middle School and a possible criminal investigation. Principal Benson sits back down, relaces his fingers, and waits for me to pick out the guilty party. I look over at Morgan and Chris, whose fates now rest in my sweaty hands. Chris snarls and rolls his eyes, his face a little more green than usual. I almost feel pity for him. Almost. Okay, I don't. Not at all. But Morgan's face makes more sense. Mouth shut tight, eyes wide with shame and regret, maybe a little guilt too. Or more than a little bit.